meeting of the Audit Committee, and welcome to our colleagues, our colleague officers. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. It really is appreciated. So we're grateful to you. So item 1 is apologies for absence. We've got apologies from Garrick.
Just Councillor Steve.
Just Garrick, yeah.
He's chairing meeting next door.
Yes.
He is, yes. Should we could go in and hijack him.
And as a Berkhamsted town councillor, and as Berkhamsted ward councillor, and knowing what's on the agenda next door, I would strongly suggest not.
Well, they're replacing the couple of councillors.
Will you be going in there? No. Right. Declarations of interest, there are none. The item 3 minutes and the actions of the last meeting, can I take those as a true and accurate record and I'll sign them accordingly?
Great.
Yep. Public participation, there is none. Statement of accounts, 2024-2025. Here we go. And I think this is going to be...
I'm going to just pass them straight over to Chris.
Oh, right, okay. Hello, Chris.
Nice.
Welcome. Right, off you go.
So, I mean, you might want to read, but I think you probably had a chance to look at the statement of accounts at the previous meeting, did you, and ask questions there. So, following on from the statement of accounts, you've got 3 papers from KPMG. I'll just take each in turn and probably pause after each one and ask if there are any questions. So Appendix B is the letter of representation. This is a standard formal form of wording that we request all audited entities to sign and return to us along with the signed statement of accounts. And as you can see in the letter, it's really the council and the confirming to us that there's nothing that we ought to have been made aware of that we haven't, and there are no unrecorded liabilities and various other confirmations. The wording is template, so in other words, the wording is exactly the same that you see for any of our audited entities up and down the country and in this sector, in the local government sector. And it would be very, very, very close resemblance to the letters of representation that our predecessor auditors here, Grant Thornton, would have requested, and other firms will request. It's a sort of standard form of wording that we ask, and it's a sort of legal part of the audit closure process. So happy to take any questions on Appendix B first of all.
Okay. Can I just go to Appendix A, I think it is. Just bear with me. No, it's not. I'm looking for paragraph 2.13, which might actually be.
Is that in regards to the balance sheet?
Page 8.
It was table 1 on page 19, I do believe. And yes, there was a number that jumped out at me on business rates because it was showing a budget of 2,257,2,945, but then a variance of 5,202.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite see how you got 2 numbers which are broadly similar between budget and actuals, and then a massive variance.
Because it's the difference between the credit and the debit, and it's because the rest of the business rates comes in as a grant from the government. So as you can see, we've got a surplus government grant of 6.2 million, which offsets the business rates.
Okay.
It's just the way that it counts down, and then with how we've done it within the budgets.
Okay. And then going on, and I'm sorry I didn't fill in your questionnaire. Oh, sorry, Trudy. On page, this is a purely personal thing. On page 26, I believe, there's a letter signed effectively by Nigel Howcutt, and there's also a letter signed by Councillor Sally Symington. And the next one, there's a letter signed, should be signed by me, and it just says Councillor Duris, and I think for consistency, can it show Councillor Terry Duris, please? Anybody, any comments? Any questions so far? No? No. Okay. Then we go on. Page 37. I might be jumping around a bit, so apologies. Page 37. How was the audit? Any comments on that area? Because I'm looking for the. Help me out here because I'm getting lost. I'm really sorry, but Appendix B. Where? Give me a page number.
That's 97 of the pack.
Right. Okay. Got it. Anything else you want to say to Appendix B at page 97?
No, I don't think so. It's like I say, it's a standard form of wording.
Yeah.
Request to be signed along with the accounts.
I think you are obviously content with the accounts. Otherwise, you would be submitting them. But
Absolutely. I mean, we can route back to that if you wish after we've dealt with the other reports. But yeah, it's suffice to say that subject to crossing a few T's and dotting a few I's and obtaining the final signed statements and the signed letter of representation, will be in a position to sign off the audit opinion and essentially close the audit, close the book on 24-25 before this side of Christmas is the intention. So,
which will be good in terms of our reputation, I would imagine, that we are closing the audit or closing the accounts.
yeah, I mean there won't be too many that have closed, signed off pre-Christmas, just even nationally, but certainly locally within the county either. So it's a good position to be in.
Yeah.
So I mean, shall I move to Appendix C and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So Appendix C is the year-end report specifically to the audit committee. So although in theory it's a private report that wouldn't be seen by the public, but in local government there's not such a thing as a private report to the audit committee, but it is intended to be in a bit more depth and a bit more detail around the findings of our audit. It is a paper that came to the meeting in September, albeit it has had some updates to it, none of which have materially changed any of the messaging, but I'm conscious that we probably have had discussion of this nature back in September. But to summarise, in terms of this paper, we're close to conclusion of the audit, close to completion of the audit. There are a few small matters that relate to the final accounts, final signed accounts, checking and that kind of thing, and receipt of the management representation letter, which was Appendix B. And then we'll be in a position to sign an unqualified, that is clean, in layman's terms, opinion on the accounts, and the aim is to get that wrapped up before everyone breaks off for Christmas. In terms of findings, there aren't any material unadjusted differences in the accounts. In other words, the two items that we've identified that were above our reporting threshold have been amended by management, and both of them related to the pensions adjustments, which is, I think we often find pensions appearing in here because it can be a bit of a moving feast at the point at which the accounts are prepared. There aren't any other new control deficiencies or new matters to bring to attention of the committee. And in terms of the VFM, which is expanded on in some more detail in Appendix D, we haven't identified any significant risks or weaknesses relating to our value for money work, and that's, as I say, expanded on in more detail in Appendix D. It's worth me saying that the page 127 of the pack, or page 25 of this report onwards, sets out our confirmation of independence as the auditors. It's really important that we are independent of the council in both appearance and fact, and we've set out there our assessment of that and why we consider that we are and remain independent of the council. I'm happy to confirm that is the case. There weren't any other points really that I was going to flag. I think it's been I suppose it's important to say that it's been a good audit process, a smooth audit process. We signed off the 23-24 accounts in February, sort of mid-February, ahead of the relevant deadline. Obviously, we'd had a bit of a delay on that because there was a delay to the signing of the prior year, and that was to do with pensions, letters of assurance, and so on. But now I feel like we're in a better place in terms of cadence and getting things over the line. If we can, getting things over the line pre-Christmas puts us in a really, really good position for next year. Long term, in about two more years, possibly the final year in which you're preparing accounts as Decorum Borough Council, the deadline will actually be the end of November. Sign up. That is the intention. In about I think it's in 2 years' time. Is that right, Clive? So it's good practice to get into this rhythm of having things done pre-Christmas, because that puts you in a really good place to be able to comply with that November deadline. Whether it actually ends up coming forward, because whether there's enough national compliance with the February deadline as it is, and that's going to come forward to January next year and so on, I don't know, but that is the intention, is that it will come forward to November in a few years' time. So it puts us in a very good position to do so. And obviously, huge thanks to Claire, Nigel, the rest of the team, for support through the audit.
Yeah, and I think I hope all my colleagues will support my thanks to Claire and to the team, or everybody. And if you can make sure that you do pass it on, so that they understand that we recognise the work and the contribution that they make. And I think I would wonder whether there might be, when the final ink is put to the paper and it's signed, we might even just do a gentle press release to the wider public to let them know that they live in an area where there is an effective and efficient council, pretty much.
I was going to make comments exactly to that level, and I just wanted to point out that to a councillor observing things, it seemed like the entire final accounts process and external audit this year happened to be sort of quite smooth, because I don't think the inquiries that we had last year sort of reached us in the same way. Obviously, I'm aware that last year was the first time you guys came in, and it was obviously Claire finding her way into things. So I think we've done incredibly well, and Terry's taken Councillor Duris has taken the words out of my mouth, in that I'll make a few more comments on this later on tonight. But I think that over the next 2 years, we need to be pushing very much the things that DBC as a council does well, so that whatever organisation we find ourselves moving into, we are in a position to lead on those areas that we excel in, and we carry our partner councils/SILs along with us. And, you know, I so very much congratulations to Claire, and, you know, thanks to you as well, Chris, but, you know, you're getting paid.
On the back of those sort of effusive compliments, I was also taken by an audit misstatement, and I just really need to understand why. It might be a timing thing, but under the heading of misstatements, there's the question of the net pension liability and a credit and a debit. Is it a timing thing or what?
So we get an early actuary report, which is what we use to do the statement of accounts, and then we get our final one after we've published. So, and that final one is that adjustment, so that's what it is. So it is purely a timing thing.
Going forward, so in a sense, it's something that is likely to happen every year. It's not a one-off thing.
Unless the actuary can give us at the 31st of March.
Yeah, that's right. They undertake their work. The scheme actuary undertakes their work essentially during the summer. Like they give like Claire said, they give this provisional position. But in fairness, you can understand that it's quite a complex process, and I think they start the work probably in about January to do the year-end valuation. So it is part and parcel, unfortunately, of the process.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm jumping in to have my understanding. Last year there was it fell under misstatement because our actuary and HCC's actuary said something different, but this time it's merely the point at our actuary said something at one point and then revised it as that was updated. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. There weren't any disagreements between actuaries.
Yeah, we kind of understood how each one approached it. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a new scheme actuary this year, Barnett wanting a new actuarial firm, and I think, to be fair, I think there's kind of four main actuarial firms that do local government pension valuation work, and I think they're one of the ones where our KPMG actuaries are more closely aligned, so it's quite fortuitous that they've ended up being the new actuaries for Hertfordshire.
Okay. You have?
Yes.
Good.
Page 112, it's more just an observation. The valuation of investment property. When was the last time we looked at the value? I know we're not borrowing money against them or anything like that, but because I would presume commercial retail property has bombed over the past 4 or 5 years, because you just got to look at the Marlows. Was it sold for 7 million and it was bought for about 45, 50 million?
I'm not sure whether that's accurate, and in any event, it's probably part of commercial confidentiality.
Oh, the Marlows. Let's go.
It's in the public domain.
Public domain.
So we value our investment property every year. We've got valuers that can conduct that every year for us. So we do a valuation each year. I'd say last year there was again, between valuers, it's you know, an estimate at the end of the day. There was not disagreement, but kind of sort of a view of whether what we've got in the accounts was slightly different to what KPMG's valuers would have considered to be appropriate. So we kind of took on board the comments we got last year and sort of spoke to our valuers again and sort of made sure that sort of comparables and things were included so that we could satisfy KPMG and sort of what the value is within the property or portfolio. So
there was a note I've got here of the review of heritage assets. What's that? Forgive me, my numbering of my notes has gone sort of awry. I don't know why. Heritage assets, is that in yours somewhere?
we have heritage assets within the...
It hasn't been changed at all, is
No,
it?
so we didn't revalue them this year.
No. How often do you know?
Not off the top of my head.
No. Right. Any other? No. Did you have anything else you wanted to?
No.
On the KPMG report? In which case I should go back to And the recommendation is as set out in the order paper, or the order paper. Are we happy to recommend those to the council as appropriate?
Agreed.
And also to delegate to the chair of the audit committee to sign the final accounts upon receiving the final audit opinion and approving any further changes. Yes?
Yes.
Agreed.
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, you are done. Thank you, Chris, for coming down
I want to
specifically.
thank Chris and his team as well, because it's been really helpful, good this year. The flow between the two teams has been invaluable to us. So.
That is, when we're considering public money and the public accountability, I think those comments are really important, and we thank you both. Okay. So, Philip, SICA.
Yes, sir. So I shall proceed to take you through the SICA. So I'm going to stop after each of the reports and invite commentary. I'm not going to kind of go through them because there are 4 topics here with different levels of weight and possibly questions that may wish to be asked. So we've got the 4 reports, 2 substantial, 1 limited and 1 reasonable. Well, all of these reports have been completed since the last time we provided an update to you. It is just worth moving on from there to actually, I'll go through the plans one at a time now. So financial controls, an audit, we audit year in, year out. This time around, we were focusing in respect of Treasury management and payroll. As we kind of expected when we went in to do it, we didn't encounter any material findings. We had no particular concerns. We provided substantial assurance, and that piece of work I had no particular worries or concerns over, but would be happy to answer any questions now if there are any.
Any questions?
Not on that one.
Straightforward.
Yeah, fabulous. Moving on from there to contract management and governance, I did just want to talk about this a little bit more than the substantial opinion might indicate. It's worth saying that this is a piece of work in respect of a very substantial report with weighty recommendations, which was produced by Ernst Young a while ago in response to a significant set of concerns that arose pivoting around a particular incident. And without going into the whys and wherefores of that, we were free to select whatever recommendations we liked within the report and evidence that they had been substantively actioned, not just in respect of the wording of the management response, but addressed the underlying root cause. I'm happy to be able to say that despite a great deal of work having been completed and us having kind of like pivoted between the report and the underlying observations, and obviously with my knowledge of the area as well, we only had 1 routine recommendation that was accepted by management. And while it did merit a priority 3 response, partly because of the area it was related to, I can't say I was weighed heavily in respect of concerns, given the broad depth of the areas that we looked at and the great width as well. Again, I will invite any commentary, and I believe there is an officer here who is able to answer any questions if you have.
We welcome Andrew Linden. Thank you for being here. Yes.
Right. I've got a question. I'm afraid it's a political one, so I'll bear indulgence. Whilst I recognise that we have a governance structure that allows and merits a certain level of decision making at officer level that sort of sits outside regular processes, or shall I say established processes, and it's perfectly allowable. It does sort of flow onto that. I'm wondering if you are able to comment on how DBC is making use of those compared to other other councils of the same size. So specifically, I find that there are an awful lot of decisions that are going by the route of the portfolio holder decision, which while the portfolio holder is the one signing off on it, it is essentially a method for officers to be able to do something within a time frame. Now, personally, I have a bit of a problem with that, and I voiced it to my own group and to other people as well. I'm just interested in your work, whether you have found that DBC is using a particular high volume of those compared to normal processes, and if you're able to share that in comparison with other councils.
So this isn't a benchmarking exercise. That wasn't the scope of this review, and I haven't undertaken a formal benchmarking exercise in order to be able to answer that question. However, I would say on the basis of my casual observation, this organisation doesn't act out of kilter with other organisations of the same size. What I would say is it acts in a different way to perhaps like some of the London councils that I work with, but that's understandable. They operate in a very different way, have different resources, and very different types of contracts and projects that they engage in, frankly. The risks are different. What I would say as well is that this organisation is blessed with particularly good staff, and so I think it works reasonably well because of that. I can certainly envisage, without wishing to allude to particular organisations, where the system in operation at Decorum might not work as well if the officers were not as on the ball as they are.
Actually, it's interesting you picked that up, Rick, because I think it possibly was at the last meeting, and I'm not sure whether you were here for that one, because I raised, I think, a similar concern that whether or not it was a backdoor route to get certain things done, and whether the full scrutiny had been undertaken by the portfolio holder before they signed them off. Because, and interestingly, there was I don't think it's on this one, but there was something I've seen where one portfolio holder decision was signed actually physically, you could see the signature, and there was another one where there was no signature, and you just, if you like, being cynical perhaps, you just didn't know whether the portfolio holder had actually seen it or whether it has just been pushed through under their guise. So I share your concern in that context.
I would think when I was portfolio holder, you sometimes signed them, you sometimes had to do an email because you weren't around to sign it, and there would be an audit trail there, and low between anybody, that an officer who tried to get something like that done, that would be gross misconduct.
I accept that, but
So,
it's not against the possibilities to actually have a signature already. I've got a signature which is saved, and if I need to, I just insert it. At least it's there. There's a confidence element.
I understand that. Just at risk of going on a tangent, I'm not trying to suggest that anything untoward is happening.
No.
What I'm trying to say is that there seems to be, in my opinion, more of the processing route that goes down a portfolio holder decision, generally made by the timeliness of an action that's needed. Not in any way suggesting that the portfolio holder is not doing their due diligence or not signing it, but I can't test that. What I'm more seeing is that because they are going through that route rather than it going through the scrutiny cabinet route, that's not to say they get more or less scrutiny when going to it. I'm just wondering whether that processing of things, because I've seen a marked uptake at DBC, I'm wondering if that is consistent among other sides.
What I will say is, in the event that something goes wrong and the system is abused, you will absolutely see a reversion to what some might perceive to be a slower and more bureaucratic process. But with officers who have got a long history of being effective and efficient, I think people are generally more relaxed.
Andrew, yes.
Just worth me adding, because obviously I've done procurement for years, so that route. So I think just to give a little bit of reassurance in terms of the portfolio decision route, we have to go to commercial board before it even reaches that route, first of all, and there is heavy scrutiny that goes in. And that meeting, it consists of the finance director, Claire sits on it, Ben Hosier, who's the head of procurement, so I sit on it. So it doesn't just come to the portfolio decision to sign off. And generally, so the route side, if it's under £500,000, goes to officer level. Obviously, there's scales depending on the seniority of that officer. If it's above £500,000, does tend to go by portfolio decision sheet. The ones that don't, are the ones that we see are probably an officer judgment, but we see that there will be a lot of member interest. So the replacement of the total asset management contract, for example, that went through quite a long, prolonged governance structure. But for me, I think there's a robust process there, and I think the reason you'll probably see it more is we tightened up in terms of governance. I think in the past there was a lot of contracts that didn't have that authority in place. That is now the case. It's a strong review process that go on through commercial board. So I think it's just a case the governance is getting stronger, which is why you're seeing more. In terms of why you're not seeing the signature, most of them should go through Modern Gov. So when they go through Modern Gov, it's published and it goes to the website. So from a digital point of view, it's probably got more to it than a signature. But if you were looking at it, you might say, well, the portfolio hasn't signed that. If you ever go on Modern Gov and you can see that decision, that shows that it has been through the portfolio holder.
You comforted by that?
I'm reassured, yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Carry on.
Okay, so from there we move on to licensing, which received a limited assurance. And while it did receive limited assurance, I do want to provide a couple of caveats here. The first is that, as I allude to in the opening sentence, it's not like the area is replete with a large number of nightclubs and gambling establishments. However, there is a legal duty on councils in order to undertake proactive checks to make sure that the licensing requirements as set out in law are completed. We raised a number of recommendations in respect of that. Management have provided responses which are, broadly speaking, timely. I did just want to kind of touch upon a few of the management responses that have been provided, just to provide a little bit of additional insight into what I think in respect of those. In respect to the first one, which is generally setting out that there's this requirement to undertake proactive exercises. I think management have provided a good level of response there, which gives me a good sense that going forward things will be addressed. It is a little bit further in the future than I would ideally like. It's worth highlighting that I believe that is largely because of the causal issues, so resources and the like. But that is obviously a priority one recommendation. I would look to see that had been addressed ahead of the year end. Otherwise, it would be required to be declared in the head of internal audit opinion, being a priority one recommendation. So we would be looking to check with management ahead of the close down date for that in order to make sure that it tracked ahead of the 31st of March. In respect of the second one, management provided a response saying it was currently in place. Obviously, so the report went out with that as the response. From my perspective, I wasn't totally happy with that as a response, because while it is completely true, so this is in relation to people having licenses, taxi licenses after they've expired. So while it is completely true that you can't break into the house and obtain the license, and they can have a piece of paper and go off and do what they like, from my perspective, after an incident has happened, people look back on these things and say, well, what was the control? Did you do all that you needed to do? And the mindset, I think, has changed in respect of an organisation's dues. So a little bit later on, we'll get to talking about the requirement of organisations to act proactively in respect of fraud. And to my mind, this is a very similar thing. You need to be able to demonstrate proactive controls in respect of things. And in the event that, you know, a taxi driver does something horrific and it turns out that they've got a licence which hasn't been claimed back, and they were displaying that, and your organisation hadn't done things in a timely manner. I mean, one of these had been from May 2024, we're nearly in 2026, and while, you know, this person had been abroad and some checks had been done, it's not quite as proactive as I would personally have liked it to have been. And if an incident had occurred, I would suggest that you would probably think it could have been a bit more proactive as well. In respect of some of the other recommendations, I believe that the timescales again are a little bit further in the future than I would ideally like. So recommendation 3, the response date for that is the 1st of May 2026, and in recommendation 4 it's November 2026, and recommendation 5 is November 2026. So the majority of these recommendations, the response date is a little bit further in the future for what is a limited assurance report than I would ideally like. Now, later on, I'll be presenting the plan for the forthcoming year, and we have an established protocol in place for this organisation whereby an area that receives limited assurance, we undertake a follow-up review in respect of that the following year to make sure that those controls are actioned. As things stand at the moment, some of these actions are not down to be completed by management until November 2026, and that potentially puts it quite close to the year end the following year, which is perhaps a little bit more uncomfortable than I might like. So while the management review responses are, I think, thorough and reasonable, I would just say that I think there are, to my mind, I would like to think that that perhaps that's the timeline by which things must be completed. And if we can complete them a little bit sooner, I would be a bit more happy. And I'll stop at that point and ask if anyone has any questions.
Well, I'll take over, Dan. Yep.
No, it's 170. There was no licensing code of good practice.
Sure.
And they're going to adopt when? Is a timeline?
I mean, so from my point of view, that's not actually a control. It's what we consider to be good practice in place in another organisation. From my perspective, while I would like that to be implemented over the next 6 months to 9 months, I particularly given some of the other weaknesses here, I think it would help strengthen things. It's not something that weighs me down in worry as compared to all the other recommendations in the report. So I don't know, you would need to ask management the timeline for actioning that.
1, 2 year, 3 year? I don't know. Timing.
Well, let's.
Page 170 of the pack, sorry.
Sorry? Page 170.
Of the pack, yes, this is what he's asking.
Yeah.
They're going to adopt.
Do you,
when?
Kim, do you want to?
That's with the enforcement.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, sorry, I was just looking for it on here. The code of good practice we were going to implement with the licensing enforcement policy, which was mentioned on here as one of the things that's not due until November 2026. I've put that date down because that's when the policy is due to be renewed. I have already been working on it, so if you wanted it to be reviewed earlier, that is something that we can look at. I've just gone with that date because that's when it's currently due. So it will tie lots of bits in that you've asked for, will all go into that policy. But if you'd like it earlier, we can have a look at bringing it forward, the review. I've just gone with that date because that's where it currently is at the minute.
My concern looking at this and looking at, for example, item 4, the recommendation 4, the response is the licensing enforcement policy is due for renewal in November 2026, and then you've got the implementation date. It seems as though, and I do accept that the licensing team have been under significant resource pressure, and I understand that. But it feels as though it's slipped a bit, which is a concern to me. And if it's due for renewal in November 2026, it doesn't quite say it will be renewed in November 2026, and because it might slip again. I would take you up on your offer, if you like, or your agreement to bring that forward quite significantly. Those end of 2026 implementation dates, to get them forward so that we actually get them back into a better timeline.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Can you come back and give us an indication of what, and don't say October 2026 either.
Yeah, that's fine, I can make a note of that.
I mean, I would think probably I'd be looking for something like June-ish. So, before I ask you whether does that?
So that would be more in keeping with the kind of timescale I would be looking for. As I say, there's quite a lot going on over the next year, and limited assurance reports or something. So as I say, although I feel a bit conflicted because it's not an area that is going to keep me awake at night, but we're literally tasked with going and checking the controls in respect of this area, which is a legal duty, and those controls were not as they would like to be. So in terms of risk to the organisation, we haven't articulated a whole bunch of, the risk must be highlighted within this document, that document, and the other document, because I don't feel it needs to be. However, non-compliance with legal duty is a significant concern in respect of an auditor such as myself. So I would rather it sooner than later.
And the worry, of course, is that it's okay when nothing goes wrong, but if something goes wrong, then you're fighting on more than one front. Rick, did you want to?
A couple of things with me. Apologies, you're going to hate me, so I'm just going to be a bit forthright on this. I also was not happy, or I was not satisfied with some of the management responses onto there. So whilst a review of the timelines, I think, is appropriate, I would also suggest that we're looking at SLT approval of the responses on that. It is worth highlighting that while we are looking at internal audit reports quite frequently, we haven't had one with this amount of risk previously. So, for example, on one of the responses that were given on page 167, which claims where there was a suggestion of using a KPI in order to be able to track cautions and prosecutions, the management response is saying that we're not able to use KPIs for cautions and prosecutions, which I completely disagree with. KPIs can be used as an internal management control for any team. They don't necessarily need to be reported to the public or to councillors, but within your own team, they are a good way to track what you're working on, what needs to be done, and therefore seeing what's going through. So there is a suggestion there that, personally, I'm not an expert, so I apologise, but I can't see why that couldn't be taken up.
Can I come back on that? So I think the point that you were trying to make, I don't want to kind of put words into your mouth, is that they feel like it is a figure that is what it is effectively, rather than a demonstration of the efficacy of underlying controls. I'll give you a kind of like similar kind of like situation. So in respect to frauds, organisations are constantly tasked with reporting the number of frauds that have taken place. And some organisations do it, some of them don't do it, but they're all about to have to. And it's a figure that you look at and you think, well, what's that actually tell me? Does it tell me how good our controls are? Maybe we're just finding every fraud that takes place here. Or maybe our organisation is being specifically targeted. Like, it's a figure that you see and you don't really know what conclusion to draw from it. Why we have recommended that those figures be included anyway is it helps paint a picture that people can then look at other figures and bear those in relation to it. So it's like a jigsaw. You've kind of like got enough pieces in order to build a picture. So even though I agree with you, in and of itself, that figure doesn't really say very much. Those figures paired with other things, I think, start to say things.
add on to that, being a SEMA qualified management accountant, we have the phrase of what gets measured gets managed. So, you know, even when you don't understand why something is, the second you start tracking it, you start asking those questions, and it begins that journey.
Well, I think just to add to that, that part of the reason why the management comment was that we wouldn't want to set the target for prosecuting a certain number of offences, because then you start to prosecute to achieve a target rather than because there's an actual issue. So I think that's why we took that approach.
A KPI, and again, I just want to reinforce, a KPI is not a target. I know that sometimes they are used to say, here's a KPI, you are tracking that against a target in order to do something. But a KPI is just a unit of measurement. It's a way of seeing consistency between things. It's a tool that you can use. So, you know, it doesn't need to be matched against something. But that whole point of, if you are basically watching, let's say, open and unresolved enforcement actions growing from month to month, that's a good way to say, okay, we're not staying on top of things, what can we do? It doesn't give you the answers, but it does tell you that you've got a trend that you need to look at. So I'm just saying it can be an internal side, because then from your own management point of view, you can be using that to do things. It's not the same as setting a target that your team has to do.
That's fine. So we do record prosecutions in the legal team, and we can certainly add that to licensing and, you know, keep a track of how many prosecutions we have and what the trends are.
One line that jumped out at me with reference 1 in the OEM action plan was, we will look to adopt a code of good practice to implement along with the reviewed policy. I'm always anxious of the phrase "we will look to," because it doesn't actually give a definite timeline or a definitive timeline. Can I suggest to the committee that we ask for you to consider and let us know by the end of this calendar year a revised timeline for the implementation
Of the enforcement policy.
of the enforcement policy and the other associated elements, and which we would anticipate to be implemented, come back to us around about June time next year.
Yeah, which should hopefully be okay. So we have to go through the consultation period, the public, which is 8 weeks.
Okay.
And we need a committee meeting either side as well. So we need to have a look at the diary and see what fits in where. But I can obviously aim for June.
I'm happy to accept, if you like, the slotting of the times, but it just gives that indication of a timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I will aim for June. Do my best. Well, once I've had a look at the let go, definitely.
You're a bit unfortunate because we haven't had a limited assurance for a long time, so it's given us an opportunity to get our teeth into one.
You had 2 last year, actually.
Sorry?
You had 2 last year.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's actually alluded to within the external report. But
Oh, really? Oh, right.
One of them was on climate, but I can't remember what the other one was.
no, I can't. One was climate.
Yeah.
You have a great advocate over there. Okay, are we?
No, I did just have another comment to make, but I'll just sort of go on, just leading from what. So the internal audit process is a valuable way to build improvements and to build resilience by identifying those things. So, yes, we're being critical, but or at least I'm being critical, but I do think it's important for going through on a journey. I just want to make a general point on what I got as an impression looking through the 4 major points in that. I felt that the licensing team weren't taking a consistent approach on some of the actions that was taken. It seemed to be that you were treating each case on its own subjective merits. You had a great system to be able to track what was happening on each individual thing that's being looked at. But the ability to sort of cast a comparison on why did you do this one on that case and this one on that case, I might be projecting a little bit, but I got the feeling that possibly was missing. So there was sort of using the team's knowledge and skills and experience was telling how much you were doing on each case and why you were doing on each one, rather than, you know, for example, the good practice conduct, which would give the idea of a common benchmark and a way to address. That, I don't know whether that is correct, because that is what I've got from those comments. But, you know, if that is the case, I'd also suggest that's probably not the best way that we're trying to look at things.
What we generally do with any complaints that come in is they're all on their own merits. So we don't, you know, connect it to anybody else. It's literally just what we've got in front of us and deciding the best course of action depending on what it is that's happened. I mean, your comment about skills of the team, I would agree. We do have an ex-police officer who's obviously very skilled. He's in the job for 30 odd years. So his experience is great for us, but he would maybe have a different approach to the other enforcement officer. But they do work together, and like I said, we just, you know, have to take each one as it comes without comparing it to anybody else, because the circumstances are never all the same.
Yeah.
If I may as well, I think my observation would be actually slightly different from that, which is I think that your resource availability has changed over time. And we looked at things over a period of time, and some things we looked at a certain period of time, and those things were perhaps not as strong as when we looked at other things at a different period of time. So I think we saw like a bit of an ebb and flow of resource availability.
No, I think it is. I think that the question of resource is a challenging one, and we do appreciate that you are sort of, I think, some numbers down.
Yeah, we're a very small team. We're only 7 of us, 2 are part-time, do 2 days a week each. So, yeah, it's a very small team.
Yeah. But you've heard our comments, and I'm sure you'll take those on as well. So, was that it, Rick?
That's it from me.
Okay. So, are we happy to accept this one? Not that we have to accept it because it's a report. No. But
can I just add something else on top of that? So, you haven't, I don't think, been to this audit committee in respect of no. So I'd just like to add. So I think this audit committee is very supportive in respect of weaknesses. So where there are weaknesses in respect of limited assurance reports, this audit committee is very much, well, what can we do to enable you or support you? And if there are blockages, if you report that back through to them, they can often help or make decisions in relation to priorities. So that would just be my observation. If I was to list all my councils that I provide services to, I would say this one is probably the most supportive and probably the most likely to leave politics outside the door, which is a really valuable asset.
thank you. And if you want me to come and make the case in support of you for what we've talked about, then I'm happy to do so. Good. Onwards.
Thank you. So moving on from that to something I was much less concerned about.
Sorry, it's 8:23. So I know Chris has got a train to catch. So if you want to sneak out, you
sneak out at some point during this next segment, to be honest.
Well, I was trying to be kind to you, actually.
Give me an opportunity.
I was trying to be kind to Philip that you wouldn't sneak out in the middle of one of his great.
I probably could have waited through the next bit, but that's
It's up to you. I'm just. I know you've got a train to catch.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
If you stay, you'll be enraptured and you'll be here for
Yes, that's my concern.
He'll cross the floor and come into internal.
There's an early morning train tomorrow. Right, without further ado, Philip, come on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so the next one actually is actually something you might be interested in, which is gifts and hospitality. And I guess while there are a few recommendations here, really my main concern would be there were a few instances where individuals who could have declared register of interests hadn't really done so for a little bit. I did, after the report was completed, have a little bit of a look through the register myself, and there are certainly fairly senior individuals who have got a declaration that have been outstanding for a little while and have been elected since and haven't updated the...
Told you about that yacht. I warned you.
Yeah, what about your 12 houses?
Well,
Carry on.
So while there's a number of recommendations that are leveraged towards management in the organisation, truthfully, the responsibility doesn't really kind of sit with them. And that is all I've got to say in respect to this, really. And I'll invite any questions.
Well, it's funny, I'm going to jump in here because it's funny you should raise this, because having sort of been forewarned about this, I looked at mine and I thought, it's out of date. So I then went on to ModGov, having discovered this is what you have to do. And it says, put in your sign in. But it didn't tell you, it said, T Duris, which is my normal sign in, my password. What it didn't tell me is that actually it's not T Duris, it's T Duris, or Terry, whatever it is, Terry Duris at decorum.gov.uk, but it doesn't say that, and you don't know that. So having done it and gone on and altered and updated it, and then submitted it, it's still not been ratified. And that's a point, I think, for probably Mark Brooks, who is the verifier of it, to actually pick it up and try and deal with those in a more rapid way, as within reason. And I know that they've been hugely constrained by LGR and so on. The other thing also, and I'm going to just make a point, when you look at the Register of Interests, which you've done, I am disappointed with the number of councillors of all political groups who actually, there are some who don't declare anything because they say withheld by virtue of. And to me, if you're a councillor and you're representing, you don't have to say the name of the house or the road number or whatever, but I do think you should actually allow people to know that you do have some sort of representation, or if not, if you don't, say no or none, rather than hide behind this smoke screen of withheld by virtue of whatever the legislation is. So that's my soapbox for the evening. Did you want to?
I just had a very minor point on that. I was going to suggest that those of us present on Audit Committee highlight that particular point to our group leaders.
Yes.
Obviously, I would hope the member services as well, and I recognise there are a large amount of councillors that do not have group leaders anymore. But yeah, I'm not sure all of our colleagues read through the audit report if they're not sitting on there. So I would just say that I think Graham might get the only one off there, but we can all undertake to highlight this to group leaders to make sure that they are aware.
So just to say, so for follow-up, I've agreed with the person who's doing the follow-up that we will select every single member of this audit committee and the leader of every committee in the decorum to do the sample check for, like, has it been actioned?
Better sell something.
I've never logged on any. I've always just emailed mine to Mark, but it's
Actually, logging on can be quite interesting, and it is just frustrating. I mean, there is a. I mean, I make the point with a little bit of a smile, but then next door we've got a planning thing going on. Now there may be members who haven't disclosed the fact that they happen to have a connection with any one of a planning application. And that's the bit, they have to declare it if they're in there, but they don't have to declare it anywhere else, even to the extent of, I live in Grove Hill, and so there's a piece that comes up that I might not like, but I'm not going to tell anybody that, and I'm not going to come there. So, end of soapbox. Governor, did you want?
No, sorry.
No? Right, okay.
I did have another question just a little further down on that report, and that's probably more actually for Trudy, I have to say. There was a point there that there's no formal register for when we declare our gifts. So question just internally, when we are declaring gifts, what's happening to those declarations if we're not recording that somewhere?
You record it by going on to ModGov.
Yeah, but, so we've all sent it in, but the internal auditors said there's no centralised register. So there's a breakdown in our process in that, because obviously you can't tell somebody to declare a gift, because there are going to be negative ones. But that question of, we have a way to declare gifts, we get reminded to declare gifts, and some of us are doing them. I got a gift last year, woo! It's the only thing I've ever got, and I got to declare it. It was under the side, but I've got that. But
We'll save up,
we'll save it. But it's just the question of, okay, what's happening with them? Because we're definitely asked to put them in.
Yeah, so we could see the information, we just couldn't see it as a proactive source of, checking to see that, like, people were,
Is that one for Mark Brooks?
Yeah.
Yes,
So
it is,
maybe I can
yeah.
answer on his behalf.
Oh, yes.
We have a ring binder where you will send us your notifications that you've received a gift, and it's all stored in a ring binder, but there's no kind of digital register, and I think that's what the auditors were suggesting. We need to have a digital register where we log everything.
so that it can actually be used instead of.
So, but can you convert your
We can, and we're in the process of doing that now.
your electronic
Yes,
ModGov? Because that's the point. We can't do it by paper.
well, we're in the process of setting up a digital register now, so that is something that we'll be doing.
And not a techno person, but obviously if you do that in SharePoint, it basically means that even if you're just throwing an image of the thing through, Copilot will be able to pull that up and make it onto a register fairly simply.
Okay, we'll take that on board, thank you.
Okay. You see, I mean, we give free advice here. Anybody else? Do you want to carry on?
Yeah, moving on from there to Appendix B, which is progress against the plan. I think progress is okay, really. There's quite a lot that's been completed, finalised and reported. I think we're in a good position to have pretty much everything done kind of by February, I would say. So I'm pretty satisfied with where we're at, and that's partly down to the goodwill, help and support that we get from officers like those present across there.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we're very grateful to you for coming. We do appreciate it.
Recommendations, I don't propose to talk through that in any detail. There are 5 listed, one of which management assured us repeatedly was done. Probably have been done, we just haven't seen the evidence in order to be able to clear it. And the other 4, well, they're priority 3s that have been deferred a little bit. And that's previously been reported to this committee. Doesn't overly concern me.
I'd much rather not see any red dots.
Sure, me too.
But I mean, if we can encourage people. Cheerio.
Good night. Thank you.
It's worth highlighting though, this is literally a mid-year report.
Yeah.
To only have 4 low priority recommendations actually outstanding at mid-year. So before we've done any of the chaser around the year end, so there's a lot more chasing goes on around recommendations at the year end. That is an amazing place for you as an organisation to be. The only thing I would flag is we haven't included the climate, but that's because we're doing a specific piece of work on climate now. So that may bring things to bear, but yes.
Thank you.
No worries.
Anybody?
One very small one from me again, not really for Philip, but just noting that we've got a comment on page 180 about business continuity. There is a recommendation of reviewing that monthly. I'm going to say, in light of LGR, I very much support TIA's recommendation for pressing monthly. Obviously, some of it is going to simply be a no change, but I think it's got to look at. And I'll jump ahead of myself onto the next item in the plans for the audit, because it is to do with LGR review. Thank you very much for putting that in. I am very glad to see that's part of next year's proposal.
So actually, that wasn't the next thing I was going to talk about. So there's an Appendix E here, which is a briefing on failure to prevent fraud. I'm worried I might steal somebody's thunder here, but I'm just going to touch upon it briefly. It's really important that you're cognizant that this is a thing where it's now the responsibility of an organisation to make sure that it has got effective controls. It's defined as reasonable measures to prevent fraud, and failure to do so, that now incurs double liability. So liability in respect of individuals, liability in respect of the organisation, and some of the punishments are actually pretty severe. Not just in terms of extra regulation, extra approach from the authorities, we're talking potentially prison sentences. So worth bearing in mind. I've listed there a number of measures that an organisation should consider to be appropriate. I've also listed within the plan for next year it down as a potential topic. We have a qualified counter fraud specialist that could come in and give advice and support and consider the effectiveness of the measures that you've got in place. I have also separately had conversations with management at this organisation, just sounding out what I believe should be done at this stage, but highlighting that this is a thing. So not just here either, within the global internal audit standards, it also requires you to receive assurance on the effectiveness of your organisation's measures in respect of preventing fraud. So that now needs to sit within an audit plan, not necessarily every year, but once over the 3 years. So I don't propose to talk you through that in any detail, take the documentation as read. Just wanted to highlight that so you're cognizant that this is a thing.
Is it something that we... Are you chair of member development?
No.
I don't know. Who is it?
I think it's
Gary?
Nigel Taylor at the moment.
Oh, it's Nigel Taylor. I'm just wondering, is it something, Philip, that you think is a potential item for councillors in their learning development, their briefings?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to cover it off at the training thing that you attend, the quarterly update at TIA. Training sessions actually is something that I had a quick conversation with Claire about earlier on, and I personally think responsibility in respect of prevention of fraud is probably something that could be incorporated within that. I believe your organisation is still formulating a strategy in respect of preventing fraud at the moment. So the minutiae of what is going to be incorporated within that, I'm not clear yet. But certainly once defined authority has been established within that strategy, training to those designated individuals as well as the wider organisation, I don't believe would be amiss. If I take comparable organisations like the NHS, for example, counter fraud forms part of every officer's induction process at every NHS organisation across the country. And I believe Councillor Friedman can probably attest to that.
Not the NHS ones, but I'm on the NGI ones.
Oh, okay,
yeah, I was just going to suggest that I agree with the sentiment on it for training. What I would say is when we're thinking of councillors rather than officers, as councillors, we've actually got more exposure on the crime of failure to prevent bribery. So it's almost like worth bringing those things together, because essentially, if we are talking to an officer sort of suggesting that something happens so that they go down a route on a way that we haven't sort of checked everything out there's a lot more chance that we would fall into the failure to prevent bribery than the fraud, because we're not the ones actually pressing anything. But it's certainly worth us having that training.
The level of responsibility.
Yeah. And I don't want to take anything away from your offer of helping, but just making sure that Claire and senior officers are aware that most banks at the moment are providing failure to prevent fraud training for free, quite common for staff also on personal levels. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I would say it's angled slightly differently, and no way am I selling counter fraud.
Shall we move on to the...
Sorry, just one other thing I just wanted to touch on in relation to that. So in councillors, the one area I would push back on, bribery act, totally agree, that's the thing. The one area I would highlight is councillors who sit on this committee. I think probably do need an awareness of this.
Yeah, okay.
Internal audit strategy. That's a weighty tome of a document. It's quite long and required to be so. The global internal audit standards came in and because of that, there is a requirement that the topics that are within the plan for the forthcoming year are against recognised risks within the organisation. So you cannot any longer use audit to look at your own little bête noirs, do advisory audits in respect of things that you have a casual interest in. You commission internal audit to be able to support the head of internal audit opinion. And it is important that you recognise that the global internal audit standards require you to ensure that we are being deployed against risks. I have recently had a number of audit committees where I've pushed back where topics have been incorporated within plans where there wasn't a discernible, readily measurable level of risk. The items we're being asked to audit were not in their risk register, strategic or otherwise. The topics that you are required to get audit assurance over, they should broadly match against your own strategic and operational risks, particularly either those that have been flagged as high-level risks or those where there is a high level of gap between mitigated risks and unmitigated risks because you are putting an awful lot of reliance in respect of those particular controls. You will note that one of the audits that has been flagged down here, use of social media, which was originally anticipated to be undertaken, doesn't presently map against any risk that your organisation has identified. That is also worth just highlighting, that is in respect of this organisation. So some councils, it is flagged against a risk that they recognise because they have a risk which is identified as reputational risk. You don't actually presently have a reputational risk. Not saying that's a bad thing. It's actually quite controversial whether a council should have a reputational risk. It sometimes comes down to that thing, well, sometimes officers don't do or say something because they're worried about the impact on the reputation of the organisation. It's something which is carefully weighed and some people have very strong opinions over.
Well, you don't the effect of being a political organisation in a sense, isn't it?
Indeed. This is a 3-year plan. You're required to get assurance over key risks the organisation faces over the 3 years. Some topics you're required to gain audit assurance against every year, and typically those would include governance and finance. There are some exceptions around that. So, for example, if you were obtaining third-party assurance from elsewhere, and it's worth highlighting that I work quite closely with external audit in respect of financial assurance. They look at one set of things, we look at a slightly different set of things, primarily around what is termed management override of controls. I see people are starting to look at their watches, and I will pause at this point and ask if anyone has any questions. But I would say, even if you don't have any questions now, can you perhaps think whether there are particular topics, areas of concern, or even just questions that you wanted to ask? And if so, do feel free to drop an email through to either myself, through to Claire, through to Nigel, and I'm sure we can incorporate any opinions, thoughts, and questions that you might have. I'm looking ideally to get initial feedback in respect of this first draft before close of play December, in order that I can present a revised report from January onwards.
I mean, one of the things that it may not be immediately relevant in this particular context, but it's come up tonight in the news that Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea have been hacked or whatever. So indeed have London Borough of Hammersmith and one of the others. So it's something that it could happen to any of us. And I suppose are we prepared, or as prepared as we could be?
Yeah, so as prepared as we can be.
Yeah.
Obviously, the dangers change all the time. I know, like this week, there is a cyber sort of investigation, testing, that all going on just to see how we stand and things. That's being undertaken right now. So they're always looking to improve. You know, we've got a cyber role as well now.
It's now mandatory to have a cyber review once every 3 years in your plans.
It staggers me the number of spam emails that, I mean, I can't remember here, but certainly in Hertfordshire, it was sort of 120,000 in a month or something crazy. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Anyway, anything?
Very small one from me. First of all, the plan is sort of nothing for me to personally add because it looks very consistent with things we've spoken about before, and everything that I would want to be on there that I can think to ask is already there. The only thing I would say is obviously Darren Welsh is now in place as CEO. The question is, I want to make sure that he has also fed into that, mainly because of the fact that it doesn't seem to have changed from what we've discussed. So I just want to make sure that.
So yeah, we're bringing this to you, but we're also SLT and wider people within officers in the organisation are reviewing this currently to also feed back into the plan.
Okay.
Yes, and I suppose to an extent, if they know, if they're aware that we as the audit committee are talking about it,
yeah,
it does mean that they've got to deal with it.
I suppose I'm looking from it from a point that we're covering everything. It's like, what are we concerned that we might have a risk on? And there's going to be things that we think about, but you know, what does SLT think there's going to be a risk? Because if he's got something that he thinks needs to be looked at, we want that on there as well.
Yeah,
That's
the approach we're taking.
Okay, strategic risk register. Is that you?
That is not me.
That's me.
Is it you?
Risks, yeah.
Okay. You have 1 minute.
Sorry.
That's all right. Let me get to the page. So yeah, so you have the quarter 1 and quarter 2 strategic risks come to you. I'll take the reports as read because you appear to have read them all very well. So thank you very much. As I say, in quarter 2, we've got 3 amber risks in relation to sort of homes, place, and resilience. The resilience, as you're talking about, is a lot of it is related to the sort of the IT risks we have around resilience and cyber attack. I can't see that we'd ever want that to be anything but amber because we're always going to be on the watch for it. No matter what we do, it's always going to be a risk there. So we're permanently working on that, and IT are heavily working on making sure we're as safe as we can possibly be through training, through improved systems.
And do we have the resilience? Sorry to interrupt you. Do we have the resilience if we did get caught?
So there are backups and there are business continuity plans and things in place. So they will do what they can. Sort of. I know at one stage it was an attack as such, but it wasn't like gaining information, but it was more processing our systems to try and crash them. And they put things in place to shut them down and stop that. And they put things in place so that now if they try to do it, it kind of pushes them away. So they're working on that all the time.
Because I get the feeling with things like Marks and Spencer's and Jaguar Land Rover that it wasn't so much necessarily the money or the detail they wanted. It was the disruption, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and that's the bit that worries us. And Kensington and Chelsea made the point that they're still getting the bins cleared, but it's the disruption behind the scenes.
So the NHS attacks that hurt the most are those that didn't directly attack the NHS, they attacked suppliers of systems to the NHS. Yeah. So the advanced attack, for example, 2 hospitals that I work closely with, they were really struggling to deliver any services effectively for 9 months.
Really?
Wow. Patient systems were down, they couldn't record. They had to go back to paper and pen.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So they're the main ones. Sort of the place is more around the level of resources we've got to deliver what we'd ideally like to deliver under the place initiatives and risks. And housing is, again, it's all about that financial cost, the ability to deliver in the current climate with construction companies. And the recommendation is to review and amend the content. Well, I don't think we're seeking to amend it, and we have reviewed it. And also to provide scrutiny and comments and feedback on the report for consideration by Cabinet and Council, which I think we can take that as read within the minutes.
Yep.
I just have one comment.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, that's fine. It's a tiny one and almost goes into the.
They've all been tiny.
Yeah, it goes into the proof that I've read it. I was just, it's not the content of the report, it's just a suggestion, especially on page 226. I was going to recommend that it would be worth having an executive summary at the top. So you've very usefully given the change quarter on quarter in red on the left-hand side, which would be absolutely great if we weren't looking at a PDF side that's got the page number that writes on top of it.
Yeah.
So if that was at the top, it may actually be slightly easier for us to skim read it.
And picking that up, where there's been a change on, where there have been a couple of changes, like page 218, revised risk for 25-26, it would be quite useful to have whatever has been revised highlighted in a colour in the narrative update.
That way.
And on with those comments, we content?
Yep.
And now, Treasury management.
The finale of them all.
The finale, yes. This is where our bankers come into there.
Yeah.
You deposit, get interest, Terry, and that's it.
Sorry?
You put money on deposit,
Yeah.
you get the best rate,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much.
If I say we've got an average of about 4.2%.
That's very
For
good.
the first 6 months of this year, so we are
Very good.
working to get the best returns we can.
Yeah, I'm likely to go down before Christmas, from what I'm hearing.
Yes, we are
but,
expecting them to
but
reduce.
we're getting 4.2 is not bad.
No,
Not bad. There's one piece in here which I think might be worth it going forward, just making a little bit more of a reference to it. It talks about our borrowings.
Yep.
And what it doesn't do is it doesn't separate the borrowing that we did from the PL.
PWLB, yep.
Yeah, to buy back our housing stock.
That is basically what our loans are. We've got a very small amount for general fund. The
Oh,
rest of it
is that
really
it?
enough for all HRA now.
Yes, it is, yeah.
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 The trouble was, the general public think, oh my God, 380 bloody £1 million in debt. Oh God, they're bust. What do they know that it's practice?
If you take it as equivalent to what the housing stock valuation is.
Oh, yeah, 133 million or
Yeah.
something.
It's very small.
In which case, just for the general public,
It would be helpful.
it would be helpful just to identify that the vast majority, or all but whatever, is the money that we borrowed to buy back our council housing stock, which actually has been very precious to the people who live in Dacorum.
We buy back housing stock we already own. It's a bit like Chico style ones, isn't it? Giving it away and giving people money to,
It was. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And we had to pay back money for the deficit thing, and the only way we could get around doing that was to actually borrow £354 million to buy back the houses that we built and owned in the first place. It's just. Did you want to say something?
No.
No.
That was literally just scratching a nose.
In which case, I think we are. Did you want to add anything?
No, I just that everything we've done is all fully in line with our treasury management strategy. There's been nothing unexpected.
We do appreciate you and Trudy being here, and Trudy's constantly working, you see, doing this. I know, but we really appreciate you. Good, we're done. Meeting closed at 20:53.